Okay, so we're going to have a look at the Stormcast Eternals supplement. But just before we get to that, I've made a few small mistakes in my Stormcast coverage so far that I want to address. One is that when I looked at the Questor, I did notice that he can be taken as a Stormcast Exemplar, but I didn't notice that you can also take a Knight Vexillor as a Stormcast Exemplar, which is good for them because both of them are about control score and sort of holding objectives and stuff like that. So it sort of puts them on a more equal footing. I still am not sure that the Vexillor is that useful. After playing a few games, I haven't found that control score buffing is very important, but perhaps in Stormcast where they have fewer numbers, it's a bigger deal. Although I'm playing Slaves to Darkness, we don't exactly have a ton of models either. I don't run Dark Oath or anything like that, so I'm pretty close to Stormcast in terms of model count anyway, and I'm not finding any of that control score stuff coming up. I don't know, maybe I will later on. The other mistake is at the start of the battle tome, I talked about, I think it's a heroic trait called Shock and Awe that used to give you -1 to be hit on the turn that you deep strike. Very hard to use that because obviously you have to charge in the same turn. That has changed to last until the end of the battle round, which is a really weird timing on it. Because if you go first in the battle round, then you can deep strike your guys. They'll get -1 to hit in your turn and -1 to hit in the subsequent opponent's turn. But if you go second in the battle round and you drop your guys in, then it's the same as before. You still only get the effect during your own turn, and it's unlikely that you'll make the 9-inch charge. So there's, it's very hard to use that heroic trait when you go second in the battle round. Very weird rule on that. I don't know why it doesn't just last until, I don't know, the start of your next turn, the way most abilities do. Or it could even say this turn and the next turn, like the end of the next turn. That would make a lot more sense, but this is the world we live in. That command trait's still weird, but I just wanted to bring up those two mistakes before we move on and finish off the Stormcast Eternal supplement. Also, I'm going to try and pay a bit more attention to the battle profiles when we get into the future faction pack reviews. I've got like a marking system and stuff like that we're going to start doing. This one for the Stormcast guys has been a little bit rocky just because it's the first and I'm really finding my feet doing this. But yeah, hopefully we improve on that in the future. All right, I don't want to spend too long on this because they're all sort of semi-squatted stuff that is going to get fully squatted in a year. There's a whole bunch of fluff at the start of this, which we don't need to go through. And we're just going to skip straight to the battle formations. Okay, so we get an additional battle formation called the Sacrosanct Convocation. It's got Cycle of the Storm, which is a once per turn army, end of your turn. Pick a friendly Sacrosanct chamber that had models slain this turn to be the target. Return one slain model to the target unit. Okay, this is really weird. The way this ability is written is very weird. It says once per turn army, but it doesn't need to say once per turn army, because the only person or the only thing that can use this ability is you, the player. If it just said once per turn, it would still work the same way because you pick a Sacrosanct unit to be the target. This is actually a bit confusing because the previous abilities that we've seen, the sort of templating or the syntax for the ability, you only need this army restriction on abilities where the units use them, because obviously there's only ever one player playing the game. So if it's once per turn and it's the player using it, that's the same as once per turn army. So this little in brackets army indicator could have been a way, I guess, to tell the player that this is an ability being used by the unit. It could have been one of them clues that's like, we have to put this army restriction on it so that you can't have like two different Sacrosanct Chamber units both use this ability each once per turn. But they can't do that because you, the player, are using the ability and targeting a Sacrosanct Chamber unit. Anyway, depending on the strength of the Sacrosanct Chamber, this could be quite good, right? If Evocators, or especially Evocators on Dracolines, are good, this could be pretty powerful. You could be returning quite a lot of wounds to a model. I guess you can't use it on heroes and stuff because you have to pick a unit that had models slain this turn, so you're not returning like whole units or anything. But actually, I quite like that. I gotta get my notes up. So we actually get a new battle formation. One thing I wasn't doing is I wasn't including the names, but I probably should. Sacrosanct. And it's once per turn. Bigger unit, add any models dying. It's got to be a Sacrosanct. I do like that it's not on a roll or anything. You just get to return one. Neat. Actually quite like that. We have Ventus Firestrike. So this guy is Sacrosanct. Magister of Hammerhall is 14 move, 12 health, 3+ save. So not as tough as some of the other heroes, but moves pretty well. Still the 5 control score. Okay melee attacks, but still a wizard. And we get Pyro Electric Blast. Pick an enemy unit within 12 of this unit to be the target. Inflict 3 mortal damage on the target, then inflict 1 mortal damage on each other enemy within 3 of the target. This is not bad, actually. A bit close range, maybe, but you could get a fair bit of mortals out of this. The fact that it's just 3 and not D3, I quite like that. Neat to have. Your hero phase, you can heal the guy 3, which helps make up for him being a few lower wounds than some of the other monster heroes that you've got in the army. It is sad that it's only your hero phase. I don't like all of the healing abilities are much nicer if they heal less more frequently. So if they happen in both hero phases, but this healed, I don't know, D3 or just 1 even, I probably like it a bit more, just because when you get double turned, it feels really awkward not having access to the healing. Often the unit dies straight away, doesn't get a chance to use that healing ability at all. It sort of feels like they don't even have it. And then we've got Comet Trail. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this to be the target for the rest of the phase. Add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks that target that enemy unit. Okay, so you get like a free +1 to hit, and you don't have to roll or anything. You just pick an enemy unit in combat. It's not like locked to infantry or anything. That's actually kind of neat. As far as like a rampage, saves you up from having to use all that attack as much, although I suppose this won't affect companion weapons. But +1 to hit's kind of neat. You'll definitely need to use it with something else, because +1 to hit on this is not going to be worth it. And then he's a wizard 2, still a wizard 2, which is nice. I think, trying to remember if Stormcast has many wizard 2s. I was a bit surprised reading the Stormcast rules. They only have like 1 wizard, the Knight Arcanum, and then it's all the way up to, I think, Krondus. So you have like a cheap 1-cast foot wizard, and then you have to pay almost 500 points for Krondus is like the next option up. And I feel like the Lord Arcanum on Toralon could have been a good option. I just like armies that have a monster hero that has sort of a monstery sort of toughness and then is a double caster. A lot of armies don't have that, but I end up playing them quite a bit. Like in Soulblight, I like playing Manfred because he's a double caster. I picked up Be'lakor in Slaves to Darkness, and he's actually a lot of fun. Same sort of thing. He's like kind of tough and a double caster. And I like Aventus. I was going to get Aventus I was building a Stormcast list before I saw all the news about the squatting, and Aventus was sort of one of the things I was going to get just because he's that double caster with the monster profile. So sort of sad that Stormcast doesn't really have that option. He's going in. I've divided up, since the Stormcast video, I've divided up my units a little bit differently, and mostly for Stormcast, they've got a lot of sort of old units, like everyone that has the old fridge armor, instead of the new Thunderstrike slim armor. I treat them all as like they're on the way to being squatted. A bit like the Space Marine Firstborn guys. They're making up some sort of lore stuff so that they can introduce a new armor set, but it seems like there's like the new ones and then the old ones. And the old ones I wouldn't expect to stick around forever. We're just sort of waiting on new sculpts on stuff. This sort of stuff is actually getting squatted, but it's like the first wave, I think, of cycling out the Stormcast stuff. They couldn't get rid of all of it. Then you wouldn't have any cavalry or anything like that. So I think that's why they've taken out Sacrosanct. Anyway, I guess everything is going to go in ancillary junk or old, because this is all very old. So we've got like Aventus, +1 to hit. Is neat. Has an okay mortal wound or mortal damage, bomb, spell. And what's this middle thing? Heals, I guess. The healing, I don't think is a big deal. It's just sort of, he might be a little fragile otherwise, but that helps out. +1 to hit is a really nice buff to have. And you don't have to do too much to get it. He does have to be in combat, but you don't have to like fight with him and then fight with another unit or something. So I quite like that. All right. Astria Solbright. Movement 10, 8 health, 3 up save, 2 control. So I think she's on a... it's one of the kitty cats. I forget what they're called. Celestial Dracoline. One of them. She's got 4 attacks, 3 threes, 1, 2, and then some attacks on the mount. So not horrible, but still kind of wizardy. She's got Lightning Pulse. Pick up to 3 enemy units in combat with this unit to be the targets and make a casting roll of 2d6. Ooh, so casting in combat is already a bit rough because obviously combat happens after casting. So something has to... She has to survive a round in combat pretty much to get this off, which is not exactly where you want her to be because she's a wizard. If you pick 1 unit, inflict 3 mortal damage. If you pick 2 units, inflict 2 on each. If you pick 3 units, inflict 1 on each. Okay, so you get the most value if you pick 2 targets, because then you get 4 mortal wounds. Otherwise, you get 3. A little bit flexible, not super powerful. I guess it'll come up sometimes. These spells, I don't mind them just having like generic random mortal wound spells, because the Stormcast Eternal's Law is quite flexible itself. It's got a lot of good options in it, and you can save Lightning Pulse for when you really need it, or Pyroelectric Blast for when you really need it, as just like a better version of your unlimited spell, because it'll do more damage while you're in range. But it's not that limiting that they don't have great War Scroll spells. Thunderous Pounce. Add 2 to charge rolls for friendly Sacrosanct cavalry units while they are wholly within 12. Oh, this is very nice. Sadly, it's only your charge phase. Charge bonuses are harder to find now. And if you can get them in your opponent's turn, they're really nice, because you can't re-roll your counter charge using a command point. It's just because your unit would have to receive 2 commands in the same phase. So being able to make sure that counter charge works, that you're spending those 2 command points and you actually get the counter charge off, is really nice. But unfortunately, this is just your charge phase. So I guess when you see these sorts of abilities, you want to pay attention to them. I think the Chaos one on the Karkadrak Lord is any charge phase, but it's only once per game. In any case, adding 2 to your charge rolls, especially on Stormcast things, is really nice because of arriving from Deep Strike. It's still a 7-inch. I think you really need +3 for this to work out. But we saw on... I think Gardas can give you +1, and the Imperatant can give you a D3 move after you set up. So combining that with Astria means you can sort of like deep strike your... And it's just any... Oh, it has to be Sacrosanct Chamber. So you can deep strike your... these guys, Evocators on Dracolines, and actually probably charge with them. So that's a really neat bit of technology. Soul Energy on the first host. Pick a visible friendly Sacrosanct Chamber unit wholly within 12 to be the target. Add 1 to wound rolls for the target's attacks for the rest of the turn. This is weird. I just keep expecting these to have the weird rider of like you have to fight with the unit and then fight with the other unit to get the buff. But this is like, I pretty much prefer this version, even though Astria has some attacks that are relevant. It would be nice to fight with her and then fight with the other thing. The fact that you don't have to be in combat, right? You can just use this in the combat phase and then pick a unit in 12 to add 1 to wound rolls. That's very nice. She doesn't actually have to get in the fray to give the buff out. I kind of like it. Astria. That's probably not how you spell it. +1 to wound in combat in 12. I assume that the Sacrosanct shooting is bad anyway. I think the Castigators. So I'm not too worried about whether the buffs for that are any good. Then what else is it? Add 2 to charge rolls. Ass. That's all we're talking about with Astria. Add 2 charge rolls. Or Sacro. Yeah. Neat. Deep Strike. Charge tool. So yeah, in combination with the Lord Imperator or with Gardas, it looks like you can get some very, very safe charges, some really easy charges out of Astria, but specifically only on those Celestial Dracolines, so I hope they're good. Lord Arcanum on Toralon. This guy's only Wizard 1, which I think is really sad. Every time I look at this War Scroll, I think he just needs to be Wizard 2 because you pay a bunch of points for him, and really the only thing it does is cast things and then maybe gives like +1 to hit. I don't know. I can't even remember if it used to do that or whether it was just Aventus that did that. But it's always had kind of sad rules, and I've always liked the model and like the idea of having that Wizard centerpiece, and it's just like never been good enough. Has the same sort of profile as Aventus, similar combat. Add 1 to casting rolls for Stormcast Eternals Wizards while they're wholly within 12. Oh, neat. So it works on himself. Again, even sadder that he's a Wizard 1. Etheric Deflection once per turn, army, enemy, hero phase. Pick an enemy wizard that used a spell ability this phase and is within 30. Oh, okay, so like in your unbind. Roll X +1 dice, where X is an amount equal to the target's power level. For each 2+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. Okay, so if they're power level 1, you roll 1 + 1, so 2 dice, and for each 2+, you inflict 1 mortal damage. But if they were a higher power level, like 3 or 4 or something, like it's like Techless or something like that, then you would roll like 5 dice and maybe do 5 mortals. This is kind of neat. It's a couple mortal wounds. You can only use it once per turn. I guess usually you're trying to hit a double caster with it, so you're going to do 2 or 3 mortals to them. A lot of armies have to pay like an artifact to get an effect like this. If you look at Slaves to Darkness, they have an artifact that's 24-inch range, not 30, and once per game, you have to declare it in the start of turn, so before they cast, and then whenever they cast a spell that turn, they take D3 mortals. I'd much prefer this sort of thing because your opponent can play around that thing by just casting fewer spells or casting 1 spell, seeing how many mortals the wizard takes, and then maybe deciding whether or not they want to cast the second spell based on how much damage they took. This thing is harder to play around because it's there all game. It's 30-inch range, so just it's the same as Unbind. Actually prefer this version. I don't know that it's worth taking the guy, but it's kind of fun. And it's only enemy hero phase, which is a bit unfortunate. You can't use it in your turn to zap them when they do a magical intervention. I think that would have been kind of nice and a bit thematic if you're like, I don't know, Sacrosanct are meant to be wizard hunting wizards or something like that. I assume that's why they have an ability like this, but I just feel like that could have been any hero phase. Any combat phase, you've got Starlight Mantle. If this unit is in combat, pick each visible friendly Stormcast Eternals unit within its combat range to be the target. Okay. For the rest of the turn, targets have a 5+ ward, and this unit has Strike Last. So you build like a little bunker around your Lord Arcanum on Toralon. The enemy charges in, and you just pick all of the guys within 3 of the Toralon. They all get 5 up ward, but the Toralon fights last. It's not a big deal because the Toralon doesn't do a ton of damage. Depending on points, I actually kind of like this guy. Right? If he's cheap enough, you get a cast, you get a decent body. This is a good ability. Being able to give out 5 up ward for Stormcast is really nice. It sort of works very easily. You can do it in your own combat phase as well. So the Toralon can sort of charge in with a unit as well. This guy is within his own combat range and visible to himself, so I suppose he gets the 5-up ward as well, which helps if he's going to be striking last. Yeah, actually kind of like this guy. So, Lord Arcanum on Orlon. So +1 to cast in 12. That's neat. Mortals to enemy wizzies in unbind range. And you don't have to, they don't have to like successfully cast a spell. They just have to like use the spell ability in the phase sometime. Even if they only use one, if they're a multicaster wizard, then you get to hit them for their power level as well, which that's kind of flexible and nice. They can't avoid it by only casting like one spell is what I'm pointing at there. Whereas with things like Infernal Puppet and Slaves to Darkness, they can avoid taking extra damage by reducing the number of spell casts they do. And like 5-up ward in combat range. But this guy writes last. Actually think you're going to have a fun year with the Lord Arcanum on Toralon, providing he's not too expensive. Okay, Lord Arcanum on Celestial Dracoline, similar sort of combat attacks and profile to Asteria. Stormwave, once per turn, army, any charge phase. Pick a friendly, visible Sacrosanct Chamber cavalry unit that charges this phase and is wholly within 12 of this unit to be the target. Inflict D3 mortal damage on each enemy unit in combat with the target. So it gives your any Sacrosanct Chamber cavalry a bit of impact hits. Kind of weird that like, so if you charge with this guy, he is a Sacrosanct Chamber cavalry unit that charged. So he'll get impact hits if you use it on himself. But you could also then, you could put it on your cavalry, but you can't get it on both. It's a bit weird that this isn't just like an aura or something like that. That he has to pick one thing and then doesn't have it on himself. Or if it, yeah, the ability could say pick a friendly visible if that unit charged, or if this unit charged, or both sort of thing. But it only works on one of them, which is a bit unfortunate. You just get D3 mortals. At least it's on each enemy unit, so you can like Tokyo Drift or charge a whole bunch of units and get a bunch of damage at once. Then you got Pack Alpha. If this unit is in combat, pick this unit and go, and up to one other visible friendly Sacrosanct Chamber cavalry unit within its combat range to be the target, and add 1 to the attack's characteristic of the companion melee weapons for the rest of the turn. Okay. Again, a little bit weird that they don't have the, it's not this guy fights and then some other guy fights. That's the way all the other sort of abilities like this are templated. Like the Lord has +1 attack or +1 to hit or something. Here it's +1 attack on the companion weapons. But he doesn't have to fight first. He just, in the combat phase, just picks another, I guess one of the Dracoline units, and they both get +1 attack on their companion weapons, which are good weapons, right? 3 attacks, 3 series, 1, 2. That's a decent profile to add 1 attack to. Like having 3s to hit on a mount profile is really rare at the moment. So I guess you can stack this with all that attack as well. You can go to 2s and 3s. This is like a Chaos Chosen profile minus the crit mortals. So actually that's kind of neat. I like this guy. Both of these things are okay. I don't know if they're excellent, but they're okay at least. So, oh, and he's a wizard. Dracoline. He's got sad charge mortals. But, okay. Companion weapon bar. Lord Arcanum on Griffcharger. I used to like these guys quite a bit. I love the model, and they could teleport around on the Wind's Etheric. So I guess we'll see if they can still do that. They're still a Wizard 1. They got same sort of Wizard combat profile. Nothing special there. On the Wind's Etheric, if this unit is not in combat, remove it from the battlefield and set it up more than 9 away. I'm pretty sure the current order battle tactic, or one of them, requires you to have a unit in each table quarter that's not in combat. I don't think that has a requirement that you can't have set up. Right? A lot of these battle tactics, I think like Take the Flanks maybe has this. don't quote me on that. But some of the battle tactics specifically say you can't have been set up this turn. I'm fairly sure the order one doesn't care if you've been set up this turn. So having a guy like this that can just teleport, that's kind of handy. You have a lot of ways to teleport with Stormcast. Obviously, you can just use your battle trait to set up units, but it is neat that you can like set up in the very, very far corner so that you don't have a risk of getting countercharged and ending up in combat, and then you can like get him out of there later on. It's sort of neat just having it, but it's not breaking the bank in Stormcast, certainly. And then instead of having a spell, he's got Healing Light as an ability that he uses at the end of any turn. Pick a visible friendly Sacrosanct Chamber unit that is not in combat and is within 12. Oh, that not in combat's a bit sad. If the target is damaged, heal D6 the target. If the target is not damaged, return a slain model to it. Okay, that's actually very neat. It doesn't have to be infantry, so again, you can return a whole Dracoline. A lot of buffs for this unit that are kind of cool, like returning 5 wounds on a 3-up save. They do have to not be in combat. So I guess that's a good excuse to use like power through. They got 5 health here, so they can power through over a lot of enemy units. Actually, I think this is kind of cool. Like heal D6 is quite a bit. Wish it was maybe 3 plus D3 or something like that. All of these D6 things are a little bit inconsistent. Or even just like 1 plus D6 would be really nice. And then if it's not damaged, return a model to it. I assume this is modal. It's not like if it's damaged, heal it. Then if it's not damaged, return a slain model to it. So you get the healing or you get the returning a model to it. You don't heal it. And then if it's at full health, get the slain model as well. But it is slightly ambiguous. But I would assume it's modal. So you get one or the other. All right. I like this guy too. Griff Charger. He's got still teleports. Is that a core ability? Okay. So it says if the unit is not in combat, remove it from the battlefield and set it up again. But because it's not core, it's not even a move ability, which is very weird. He can retreat out of combat and then teleport. You just have to take the D3 mortals from retreating out of combat. But you can still duck out, then ride the Winds Etheric, which I think some of the other units can't do, or like the Vanguard Chamber battle formation in particular is a core ability. Again, I should probably go check that, but yeah, this actually seems to like work the nice way. They seem, this edition for some reason have a habit of doing this. They put all the rules that work really nicely in Spearhead. They work a bit more like the 3rd edition rules maybe, so maybe that's why I feel like they work nicely. But this thing, being able to move first and then teleport is actually kind of neat because of the not in combat requirement. They could just have it so that he could do it even if he is in combat, then you wouldn't have to retreat at all, but it's a bit more flexible than maybe some of the Vanguard stuff. And retreat first. And returns are saying the same thing I mentioned a bit earlier on Aventus. For Aventus, he only heals in your hero phase, but this ability is end of any turn, which is actually really neat. I think the fact that you have to be in combat, it would really suck. If it didn't have, if it was just in your turn, you'll get some extra times where you can like retreat your Dracolines away or use translocation or something and get them to the back line, and you can just like one Dracoline left of a unit of 6 is going to quickly fill back up to having 2 or 3 units. You can rally them and get them back really quickly. I actually think this guy is quite good, just because, well, it'll depend on how good these are, but just looking at the wounds and the save of evocators on Dracolines, this guy already looks stonks to me. All right, got the Lord Arcanum on foot. 6 health, 3-up save, normal sort of foot profile. He's got an okay sort of wizard attack, the Stormcast wizard attack. Add 1 to casting rolls when this unit uses a summon ability, which I'm pretty sure is what the other wizard does, the Knight Arcanum. And or the knight. Actually, I don't know what it's bloody called. The other wizard that you get in Stormcast has this, and I think they have a better bonus than this. They might also get +1 to banishing rolls or something like that. So this is not very impressive. He's still a wizard 1. End of any turn, he's got magical mending. Pick a visible friendly manifestation, wholly within 12, and then heal at d6. That is trash. So Lord Arcanum on foot. Do not take. Yeah, I don't think this ability is useful at all. And you've got other wizards in the army. Namely, you'll have the guy that stops manifestations getting near him and has like slightly better attacks against manifestations and stuff. I think that's going to see a lot more use, especially if he has. I might look it up. If he has the bonus to banish them, that's probably more useful in general than healing a manifestation. There's not that many situations where you want to heal a manifestation. So what is he? The Knight Arcanum. He adds 1 to casting rolls and add 1s to banishing as well. So that alone, I think, makes him better. And enemy manifestations cannot pass through or end a move within this unit's combat range unless they started the move within this unit's combat range. That's kind of neat. And he has like a ward against them as well, which I don't think it will come up very much. So he's not a great wizard in my mind, but this is an even worse wizard somehow. So I just wouldn't take him. Evocators on Celestial Dracolines. So move 10. This is, I guess, an important war scroll for the Sacrosanct guys. You move 10, you've got 5 health on a 3-up save with 2 control. That's a very nice wheel for something that you can return slain models to. Being able to return 5 wounds on a 3-up save, that's just really powerful, and you can do it a fair bit. You can do it from the Griff Charger, you can do it from the Subfaction ability, and you've got some other healing in the army as well, like with Healing Storm and stuff like that. So having a big health pool, really, really handy for the army. Warrior Mages, effect, this unit can use Unbind abilities if it was Wizard 1. That's really neat. So they're not a wizard. I feel like they used to be a wizard before and actually cast spells. Bit sad that they don't do that. Although I think they used to only cast a spell that like gave them +1 to hit or something. Don't quote me on that, but this is actually a really neat ability to have, just to have extra Unbinds. If you're playing Sacrosanct, I imagine you're playing a couple wizards as your heroes anyway. So you might already have plenty of Unbinds, but you could just take like a bit of Sacrosanct and a bit of like, maybe take Ionis or something. So you've got like double praying as well. And that way you can like buff up the amount of Unbinds that you have in case your opponent is running a lot of wizards. So I actually really like extra Unbinds in the army. Then you've got Dracoline Fury, which is just a passive. While this unit is contesting an objective you do not control, it has strike first. Hey, that's actually really cool. Not the most reliable in terms of being able to get on an objective you don't control, but certainly reliable in that we know it works, right? At the start of your turn, if you're like, my Dracolines are going to get on that objective, there are some risks there. Obviously, your opponent could redeploy so that the Dracolines will have a hard time maneuvering onto it. But if you're setting up sort of like the Wombo combo, you get your +2 to charge on your cavalry from Asteria, right? They got +2 to charge for Sacrosanct Chamber cavalry units wholly within 12. And then you'll have maybe Gardas, maybe the Lord Imperator, I don't know. And your opponent is on an objective. You can set up in a way that's very hard for them to stop you getting on that objective, especially if they're off it a bit, if they're back off it, then you can deep strike near them. And if they deploy forwards, then you've got a much more reliable charge. So even if you're not taking the Imperator or the or Gardas, you can sort of pressure your opponent even just by deep striking in Asteria and like a unit of Evocators next to her. They have to risk you getting the strikes first by making the charge, or they have to redeploy forward to try and screen you off the objective and make the charge easier, which is hard sort of ask for them. Obviously, knowing that you can get strike first lets you plan other parts of your turn. It's very powerful to know that you can get it. So if you can plan your turn around like, oh, these Dracolines are definitely going to be able to get on this objective, you know what your other charges and shooting is going to look like on the other side of the board so that you can activate the strikes first and the other thing at the same time. Gives you a lot of flexibility. Just that little risk out of like redeploy. But if you play around that well, that looks like a really good ability. And they have solid weapons. Crit mortal, 3s and 3s, 1 rend, 1 damage. So there's a fair bit of damage coming out of that. And then a fair bit coming out of the Dracolines. So no crit mortals here, but 3s, 3s, 1, 2 damage. And you can get that +1 to buff, +1 to the attacks on the companion weapons from this guy. I really like them. I think they do a fair chunk of damage, and they got some good buffs. They got a lot of healing. And this strike first is really nice. Just the way it works is quite powerful compared to a lot of other units in the army have to roll a 3-up or have to roll an 8-inch charge like on the Annihilators or something like that. In my mind, this is probably a bit more reliable. You can find situations where you know this is going to work, where your opponent can't reasonably screen out the objective from you, and you can deep strike in and charge from Asteria. Actually, really, really like this as a unit. So we got Evocators on Dracoline. Strike first when on odds you don't control. Really neat if they take an objective off you as well. Then, like if you've got these guarding an objective and they come in and take it off you, and the unit survives, it'll just have strike first. It doesn't have to have like charged this turn or anything. It just has to be contesting that objective. So you just sort of get little bonuses of strike first. That's another situation where at the start of your turn, you know you're in combat on the objective with your Dracolines and you know you don't control it. You're definitely going to get strike first with those Dracolines this turn. So you can plan the whole turn around it. It's very nice. Bonus Unbind. And like good attacks and profile. They're not the fastest at 10 move, but that's fast enough. And yeah, that's a decent combat profile. Depending on points, like I like these a lot. I like the Celestial Dracolines. It's sad that they're going. It's kind of an army where I feel like they're giving you a send-off. They may give you some good rules that you can use for a year and have some fun with your army, but then it's getting sort of squatted, so you don't want to like buy into it. But yeah, no, I think that's really neat, and I'd be happy for the year that I get to play with these if I had this army. Then we got Evocators on foot, 3 health, 3-up save. Then Evocator weapons, 3 attacks, 3 3s, 1 1. They lost their Grand Staves. I think these guys might have had Grand Staves as well, but they all have the unified weapon profile now. That's not a bad profile. Damage 1 hurts them a little bit. Warrior Mages, this unit can use Unbind. Okay, so you just have tons of Unbinds if you're taking Evocators. And then you've got Empower in the combat phase. If this unit is contesting an objective you control, pick a visible, friendly, non-hero Stormcast Eternals infantry unit to within 12 to be the target. Add 1 to wound rolls for the target's combat attacks for the rest of the turn. So they'll probably pick themselves most of the time, but you can pick something else. So you can have like these guys contest the objective you control, and then you can put infantry in front of them, and you can give the infantry in front of them a buff. I don't know how often that'll work out, given that you can't like move off the objective and still do this. But the fact they can do it to themselves is kind of neat. I don't know if they do enough damage. Like these guys are helped out by the Dracolines quite a bit, being 2 damage. Yeah, depending on points, I guess they could be useful. And they're not a bad target for healing because they have 3 health as well. If they're only 2, they'd be a bit sad, but returning one of these still feels pretty good if you've got no Dracolines to return or something like that. So, Evocators, bonus Unbind, and like also on the wound, contesting home stuff. So you can use it on other people. I'm just assuming you'll mostly use it on themselves. The add 1 to wound is a bit sad because you've got +1 to wound from finest hour half the time anyway, so it overlaps a little bit. It would just be, sometimes I feel like for the Stormcast guys, they prefer to have +1 to hit on their war scrolls, so they can have +1 to hit and wound on that same turn. There you go. Lord Exorcist. Sort of same Stormcast hero profile. Bad attacks. He's got the Redemptor Casket. Models cannot be returned to enemy units in 12 of this unit. I think this might have been on... They might have had a hero that had it before, and maybe the foot troops leader. I'm forgetting what they're called, but they did have this ability in the army before, even if it wasn't 12 inches. It's actually probably a bit more useful now than it used to be. I'm seeing a lot of things that return models, but I still think this is a bit silver bullety to like bother taking it. You got Purifying Blast. Pick a visible enemy priest within 18 of this unit to be the target. Sorry, 1 second. I'm getting a phone call. All right. I suppose that's the danger of doing really, really long takes on stuff that I'm not going to reshoot. All right. Wait. We got Purifying Blast. You pick an enemy priest within 18 of this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 2-up. If the target has any ritual points, remove a number of ritual points from it equal to the roll. If it has no ritual points, inflict D3 mortal damage on it. That's kind of interesting because priests are pretty good at the moment. You can only do it in your hero phase, so you have to be in 18, I guess. During a hero phase, you could teleport the guy so that he is within 18 of an enemy priest and then use this ability. There's going to be a lot of priests. I think priests are a lot better this season, and a lot of the time they're going to build up ritual points. So I think this ability will do stuff, but it's got this neat rider that you can always do damage even if they have no ritual points, like if they've just spent them. D3 is kind of neat. 2-up's very reliable. Actually kind of like this ability. Probably not enough to bother taking the whole unit because of how important drops are and things like that. The guy's still a wizard 1, so he's not a complete waste. And when you compare him to maybe the Knight Arcanum, I actually think this guy is a lot better if you're going to take a Knight Arcanum, or definitely if you were going to take the Lord Arcanum. I'd much prefer a Lord Exorcist in both cases. I think this is really cool. The Redemptor Casket might come up. I wouldn't rely on that. I guess if they don't have priests and they're not returning models to units, then these are dead abilities. But the same is kind of true if your opponent doesn't really use manifestations much, or if the way they use manifestations doesn't interact much with the Knight Arcanum or the Lord Arcanum or whatever it is. Like, there are situations where those other abilities aren't very useful either. I think it'll be more common that people have manifestations, just that you won't necessarily use like the +1 rend against manifestations on the Knight Arcanum, or you won't be using the exclusion zone around them. +1 to banish is useful. You probably will use that, but you'll also probably use this. A lot of armies are going to take priests, and this is kind of neat, I think. It removes a whole D6 ritual points. It's not just roll a D3 or something, so you can actually really screw over a priest. I know a lot of the time they'll be praying in your turn, and then like to build up points, and then in their own turn they'll finish a prayer, but then yeah, you just inflict D3 mortals on the priest. Kind of neat. I actually like this guy. So Lord Exorcist kills ritual points and stops guys coming back. Decent competition in a bad pool of wizards. Normally I just ignore him. I think this is like too silver bullety, but your other low cost wizards are not great. In general, I don't think you take any of them, like the Lord Exorcist or the Lord Arcanum or the Knight Arcanum. None of them so far are interesting. This guy might be an exception because this is actually pretty neat, but I guess we'll get to it. So they've got the Knight Incantor, same sort of profile, same sort of weak combat profile. He's got a passive, Etheric Destabilization. While they're within 30 of this unit, subtract 1 from casting rolls for enemy units when they use summon abilities. Okay, I got pretty excited at just -1 to cast, but it's only on summon abilities. I think this is still kind of neat. I'd rather, instead of having +1 to banish, like on the Knight Arcanum, having -1 from the casting roll, I think is actually much better. You've got a better chance to unbind it. If your opponent's trying to cast something like Kronspine that has an 8 casting value, -1 to their casting roll is really useful. And on top of that, banishing for things like the Cron Spine and the Purple Sun doesn't always work. It only does 6 wounds to it, whereas unbinding it is like killing the whole thing outright. So unbinding much better, and I prefer this ability over the Knight Arcanum's ability to like deal with them once they exist. Then you've got the Voidstorm Scroll. So once per battle, as a reaction, the opponent declared a spell ability for a wizard within 30, and then you can use this reaction. The spell is unbound and its effect is not resolved. I'm trying to think in the core rules if there's any restriction on using multiple reactions to the same ability. I don't think there is. Although I do notice this has the unbind keyword, so that's probably what restricts you. I think maybe you can only use a certain number of unbinds. I might actually quickly look that up because it's kind of interesting. I assume you can't use this and an unbind. That's how it used to work. But if you could use this and an unbind, that'd make it a heck of a lot better. Looking at wizards. So each wizard can use an unbind reaction a number of times equal to their power level each phase. This is an exception to the rules of 1. And then unbind itself says make an unbinding roll of 2d6. If the roll exceeds the casting value of the spell, then the spell is unbound and the effect is not resolved. This reaction cannot be used more than once per casting roll. Okay, so the restriction isn't in the unbinding spells section. It doesn't say like you can't use more than one unbind ability per spell. It's unbind itself as a reaction says that you can't use this reaction more than once. So weirdly, I have a feeling you can try to unbind the spell with a different wizard, and then when you fail to unbind it, you can use the Voidstorm Scroll. And you don't have to... You do get to see the spell ability, because when you cast spells, part of the declare ability is rolling the dice. So you declare... Actually, it's a bit weird. This one doesn't say to roll 2d6 as a casting roll. It probably should, because this one does. Bit odd. So this is the normal templating. Pick up to 3 enemy units in combat with this unit to be the targets, then make a casting roll of 2d6. This one actually is missing the casting roll text, but this is how they normally look. So when they declare the spell, they roll the 2d6, and you get to see how high that value is, and then you get to unbind it. You can't use this wizard to unbind it and then use this because it is an unbind ability, so you can only use either this or an unbind because you're only power level 1, but you could always use a different wizard, or if you're a higher power level for whatever reason, I think maybe the Dias Arcanum or something, you could try to unbind it, and then you could use this if that failed. So if your opponent, what I'm getting at is if your opponent rolls low, you probably want to try the unbind first because the unbind is going to be successful. But in the off chance that it's not, you still have the Voidstorm Scroll in your back pocket. I really like this guy. I think he's the wizard you take. This is the most consistent sort of, you'll come across manifestations a fair bit, and this is better, in my opinion, than all of the Knight Arcanum stuff put together. Definitely better than the Lord Arcanum stuff. And this is a really, really powerful ability to have. Sometimes your opponent just like rolls a 12 on their Cron Spine and you just really don't want it to show up this turn, and you can just get rid of it. I think that's fantastic. Probably better than all the other stuff. I do like this guy, but probably too situational, and the other guys just sort of aren't as good as the Incantor at dealing with spells. The fact you can just auto-unbind one of the manifestations, and it's not only manifestations, but the fact that you can do manifestations with it just means that it's going to be better than the anti-manifestation guys. So I still think Knight Incantor this year, what wizard of choice? Still auto-unbind. And use in addition. I'm just going to say probably for this because it's like a bit of a... I could just be missing something. But from what I can see, you can use it in addition to the unbind. And -1 to summon in 30 as well. A lot of the other abilities have sort of... Like this guy, you have to be within 18 to do his anti-priest stuff. This one's just the full, if you're in unbind range. That's really nice. I actually think this guy stonks. I'd probably bother taking him if I had room in my list for the drop for him, which in Stormcast I have a feeling you don't, but if I was taking one of these Foot Wizards, I'd take this guy. All right, Knight Heraldor, the tooty horny guy. All right, we've got a Sigmarite Broadsword, normal sort of Stormcast profile, weak combat attacks, call to battle. If a friendly warrior chamber unit wholly within 12 of this unit uses a rally command, you make 3 additional rally rolls. Okay, I guess that's thematic since he's got the musician now is responsible for rallying, but that's not a super powerful ability, and especially since it's only restricted to warrior chamber guys. Your shooting phase, you've got Thunderblast. Pick a visible faction terrain feature. Faction terrain only. That's sad. He used to be able to like pick any terrain. Faction terrain within 18 of this unit. To be the target, roll a dice on a 2-up. Inflict an amount of mortal damage to the target equal to the roll. Wait, to the terrain itself. On the target. Oh, okay. So it doesn't like hit the terrain and then blast to everything around it. He like slowly destroys faction terrain. Okay. No. Knight Heraldor, rally stuff, and anti-faction terrain. This should be like unlimited range. He's only doing like D6 mortals to it, and I think faction terrain, from my experience, isn't that durable, but is durable enough that this is not a great shooting attack. Since it's like a silver bullet, you're just better off taking like any shooting guy and just shooting it, because then you could also shoot non-faction terrain things. This is very weird. Even against like Sylvaneth, who want to put their faction terrain up within 18 inches of him and put it everywhere. Nah, I just don't think he's worth it at all. Gavriel, pretty sure Gavriel is getting replaced by Gardas. I feel like that's the sort of the arc. This guy is a bit old and weird looking, but Gardas has the same +1 to charge sort of ability. Has a very similar sort of name and a was it Gabriel Steel Helm or something. He's a very, very sort of similar guy in a lot of ways. And I feel like it's he's just sort of the newer, better version, the Primaris version of Gavriel. Anyway, normal Stormcast profile, doesn't have a ward. He's got the sort of Lord Celestant looking combat profile, so he's okay in combat. He's got a Sigmarite Thunder Shield as a passive. Each time you make an unmodified save roll of 6, inflict 1 mortal damage back to the attacking unit. So that's kind of like the Extremist Chamber ability. Not super impressive. This guy's not going to make that many save rolls with the profile that he has, so it's not going to do a ton of damage back. Once more for Sigmar Charge, pick this unit and a visible other friendly warrior chamber unit within 3 of it to be the target. For the rest of this phase, when making charge rolls for the targets, add 1 to the number of dice roll, then remove 1 dice of your choice and use the remaining dice as the charge roll. I actually think this is very good. Roll 3, take the highest. Highest 2 is a really, really big charge buff. It's very, just statistically, I think it's very hard to fail your 9-inch charge when you do this. And I think when you reroll, you get it as well. So this guy and a warrior chamber unit, which if you remember includes annihilators with meteoric grandhammers, these two as a power pair, I think is excellent, right? Like points permitting, Gavriel has a place. That alone is like a bit of technology that you will pay the points to get it if you need it. It's more reliable than the Imperatant or Gardas or whatever. He used to just add 3 to your charge roll, and in my mind this is similar. I'm not going to do the statistical analysis on it, but actually I think this guy is really worth knowing about, even if you're just mainlining Stormcast. You're just using the main faction pack for Stormcast. Converting a Gavriel Shoreheart for your 6 annihilators with meteoric grand hammers, dropping down and charging is going to be something worth looking at, I reckon. I'm actually I was humming and hawing about how much I wanted to look at the supplements. I just assumed they'd be really sad, but there's some really neat rules in here. So roll 3 dice and take the 2 highest for warrior. turn per unit. Now, is it once per game? It doesn't look to be. It's just your charge phase. You pick him, he gets the buff, and a visible warrior chamber right next to him to be the target. And then you just get it. That's really neat. Sad you can't use it in the counter charge, but honestly, it's very, very good. It'd probably be too good to use in the counter charge. Yeah, I rate this guy. I think actually worth taking if you're trying to do the charge out of deep strike strat. Okay, just noticed this in editing. I don't actually mention anything about the Annihilator's ability. One of the reasons Gavriel is really useful for those Annihilators with Meteoric Grand Hammers is that the Annihilators care about getting an unmodified 8 up on the charge roll. I think either they get strikes first or they make the target that they're charging into get strikes last when they do that. And yeah, his ability doesn't count as modifying it, so it just increases your charge roll and increases the chances of getting that unmodified 8 up. So it's a really neat power pair for that reason, as well as just being able to charge out of deep strike. All right, Lord Castellan. This guy used to just hand out like +1 to save. I think that was the main reason you took him. The old fridge with the lantern. He's got okay attacks, not good. Same sort of Stormcast profile. He has a Gryph-hound token, and when it's removed, you just lose the attacks from it, which is not many. Once per battle, any combat phase. For the rest of the turn, this unit has a ward of 4 up. Remove the Gryph-hound. Okay, so once per game, you get a 4 up ward from the Gryph-hound token, but then you lose its attacks. I think the ward is going to be a lot more valuable than the attacks. You've got the warding lantern in your hero phase only. Pick an objective within 12 of this to be the target. For the rest of the turn, friendly Stormcast Eternals units have a ward 6+ while they are contesting the objective, and ward rolls cannot be made for enemy units while they are contesting the target. I don't think this anti-ward tech is anywhere else in Stormcast, but the fact that your enemy has to be on the objective that you are within 12 of in your turn, yeah, and that you've got only a 6 up ward on your guys, I just think this is not making it. You don't want to use a drop on, let's see, the Lord Castellan. I actually really like this model and this dude in general. I was happy that he was good before, but I actually never got to play with mine. I painted him up and then he's getting squatted. Not great. Yeah, just not great. I don't think it's worth writing too much about him. I just wouldn't take him. Knight Venator. Although I should point out, like, you've got a lot of healing and returning. I assume there are better ways to protect your guys. Just from memory, I think there are better defensive buffs in your army. But it can be worth stacking them if you're healing your Dracolines and you want to try and boost their defense as much as you can. A 6 up ward is something, but I still probably think it doesn't cut the mustard. All right. Knight Venator. We've got 12-inch move, but otherwise the normal sort of Stormcast profile. He's got a Realm Hunter bow, which is range 12, bigger than the Knight Judicator. Anti-monster, +1 range and crit 2 hits with 6 attacks. Why? 6 attacks. Okay. Surely it could have been 3 attacks that do 2 damage each, but whatever. 3s and 3s, 1 range, 1 damage. And he's got a bow stave and a companion, so he doesn't really do any damage in close combat. And he can't shoot in combat with his bow, so you want to keep him pretty far away. Once per battle, army your shooting phase. He's got the star-faded arrow. You pick a visible enemy unit within 24 to be the target. If the target is a non-monster unit, inflict d6 mortal damage on it. If the target is a monster unit, inflict d6 +3 mortal damage on it. And it's a core attack shoot. So you give up your shooting for the turn, which is likely to do, I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe 2 wounds. And then you get to inflict d6, just automatic, no rolling. I think you used to have to roll. It was like a 3 up or something. It's very annoying. Even if it was a 2 up, it's like once per game. And it's the only thing the hero does. So it's kind of weird they make you roll. But if the target's a monster, you inflict d6 +3 mortal damage. That's a decent amount of damage. I still don't think you bother taking this guy once per game. But like, there's a fun meme list out there where you take like 5 of these guys, or you just fill your army up with them and you just blow up enemy monsters. D6 mortal damage on a hero is enough to potentially just kill a foot hero, which I think might be the more interesting way to take this guy, because, oh no, this is a shooting attack. So this probably gets ruined by guarded hero. Well, let's have a quick look. I have a feeling guarded hero just says you can't use attack abilities or shoot abilities or something. I should just find it. God. So if this hero is infantry, they cannot be picked as a target of shooting attacks. I guess shooting attacks are going to be attacks that have the shoot keyword, right? It's going to be anything that has these two keywords will be a shooting attack. That's my guess. So it looks like you probably just can't use this to murk their little infantry foot heroes. I don't think this guy does as much anyway. So what is he? The Knight Venator. Not much damn. Once per game. D6 plus 3 against a monster. Don't have to roll. So not having to roll is quite neat, but I still think this guy's probably pretty bad and you don't really take him. The Knight Zephyros, he's got 7 movement, 6 health, 3 up save, and 2 control, so a bit faster than the other Stormcast heroes. It's got a pistol, which does maybe a wound, maybe not a wound, not much damage on range 12. Tempest Axes, anti-hero plus 1 rend, crit 2 hits. You got 6 attacks, 3 threes, 1, 1. So only 1 damage. It's not going to do much damage regardless, even if you get into a hero or whatever. You're just not doing a lot of damage. You've got the shoot and or charge, even if you run or retreat in the same turn because you're a Vanguard chamber. And then Tireless Hunter, you can remove the unit from the battlefield and set it up more than 9 away once per turn. Army your movement phase. This would have made a bit more sense if they had like the vampire ability. Soulblight have an ability that lets their vampire lords essentially do this. They remove them and set them up again 9 away, but it's 9 away from enemy units except for heroes. I think they can set up with 3 away from enemy heroes. So if there's like a hero standing off by themselves somewhere, the Vampire Lord can sneakily appear behind them and try and assassinate them, which seems like the Knight Zephyros' job here. He's sort of like wants to assassinate foot heroes because he doesn't have a good enough profile to deal with anything else. He barely has a good enough profile to deal with foot heroes, but he can't even get close enough to them. So bad, I think. I think this guy used to be Neve Black Talon, and Neve is cooler war scroll with her own warband and stuff, but I think just bad. Don't bother. Lord Ordinator, ordinary sort of wheel. We got not good weapons. Once per turn, army any shooting phase. He can pick a visible friendly Sacrosanct Chamber war machine wholly within 12 of the unit to be the target. The target's attack score critical hits on an unmodified hit roll of a 4 up. I think the only Sacrosanct Chamber war machine is going to be the Celestar Ballista, so I guess we have to read that war scroll to know if this guy is any good, because that's the only thing he does. He's not a priest or a wizard or anything. The Celestar Ballista has movement 3, 6 health, 3 up save, and 2 control, and its shooting attack is a range 18, anti-monster plus 1 rend, crit 2 hits. It's got D6 plus 6 attacks, so I guess you get 8 or 9 attacks, or I guess 9 or 10 attacks. You hit on a 4, wound on a 2, and you've got 1 rend, 1 damage. So it just looks like crit 2 hits, and then you've got this ability, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit, and that charge, roll a dice on a 2 up, inflicted amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll, which is a kind of fun anti-charge ability, I suppose. Only once per battle, but to be fair, once the enemy unit charges this thing, it's probably going to be dead anyway, so once per battle is not that big a deal. So this guy, the Lord Ordinator, I don't have my mouse highlight on. The Lord Ordinator gives you critical hits on a 4+, and it hits on a 4+, so it just means all of your attacks will hit twice, which I think is kind of what this used to do, but it had a slightly different profile, so it's hard to compare. Just means instead of like 10-ish attacks, you can consider it to have like maybe 20-ish attacks if you take the Lord Ordinator. I suppose it has slightly more than 10 attacks because it'll get some crits by itself. I can't imagine taking a Lord Ordinator is better than just taking another Celestar Ballista. I don't think you want to take another Celestar Ballista because it doesn't look like they do that much damage. Potentially, you could set up a little nest where you have like 2 Celestar Ballistas right next to each other, and if your opponent charges in, it looks like you can use this once per battle, any combat phase. You can use this ability that the Celestar Ballista has on any number of ballistas once per battle, and you can use them in the same turn. So you could deal 2 or 3 d6 mortal damage on the thing that charges them. So like if they're cheap enough, there is a potential that the Celestar Ballista is worth taking, but I think they would have to be very cheap to bother doing that pretty much. And I'm glad they made their little engineer guys tokens, so it doesn't matter what you do with them. So I'm going to write these as the same sort of thing. We've got Lord Ord, bad, and then the Celestar Ballista, bad, unless almost free. Very hard to justify taking drops, for something like a Celestar Ballista. It would have to be very, very cheap, and I don't know. Yeah, I just don't think that's worth taking. It seems like they don't really like the Celestar Ballista. At the moment they made it, they're like, I don't know if Stormcast should have war machines. That's a bit weird. I guess they gave them the chariot later on though, so who knows what they're thinking. Then we got Castigators, the exploding crossbow looking dudes. They've got 5 move, 2 health, 3 up save, 1 control, and I'm pretty sure these guys come in 3s. They've got a Thunderhead Greatbow, which is anti-cavalry +1 range and crit 2 hits with 15 range, 3 attacks, 3 threes, 1/1. It's not super impressive damage output. I guess I'm thinking about these guys compared to Vigilors, which have 2 attacks, 3 threes, 1 range, 1 damage. And I don't think they have these abilities, but you do get 5 Vigilors. So 5 Vigilors with 2 attacks each is 20. 3 of these guys have 3 each is only 9. Sorry, it's a 10. I can do math. 5 Vigilors, 2 attacks each is 10. And these guys is only 9, but they do have crit 2 hits, so they'll do a similar sort of output. And then they've got anti-cavalry, so they do a little bit more against cavalry. So not useless depending on points and that sort of thing. But you do lose some wounds, and you don't have like any combat profile at all. You can't shoot in combat with the great bow as well, whereas Vigilors have a decent combat profile. And yeah, so dependable Gryph-hound. This unit's Gryph-hound is a token. I didn't even know they got Gryph-hounds. If this unit's Gryph-hound has been removed, it cannot use the Scouting Companion ability. Okay, I'll just read that first. Reaction, you declared a shoot ability for this unit, Scouting Companion, until the shoot ability is resolved. Add 3 to the range characteristic of the great bows and add 1 to hit for the rest of this unit's shooting attack. Not the rest, add 1 to hit for this unit's shooting attacks. Remove this unit's Gryph-hound token from the battlefield after the shoot ability has been resolved. So once per game, you get an 18-inch range shooting attack with +1 to hit. It's kind of neat. I wonder if you reinforce this if you get 2 Gryph-hound tokens. Actually, don't know how that works, and I wonder if the battle profiles tells us how that works. So we got Castigators. Just says unit size 3. So I don't even know. Does it say on the war scroll somewhere? Yeah, I actually have no idea whether this, like, where I'm supposed to look for this, whether they come with just 1 or 2, or I didn't even know they came with 1. And if you reinforce them, if they get extras, but I suppose that would be relevant if you have a reinforced unit, then you get to use that buff twice. That could actually be quite good because the reinforced unit benefits from the buff more because you've got more guys to get the +1 to hit and use the extra range. Castigator Etheric Channeling. If this unit has not used the move ability and was not set up this turn, its shooting attacks score critical hits on an unmodified 5-up for the rest of the turn. That is kind of equivalent to +1 to hit, but it'll stack with the other +1 to hit stuff because you've got crit 2 hits. So you get an extra hit on a 5-up, which is the same as just hitting on 1 better. That should work in your opponent's turn as well. And I suppose the scouting companion thing could work in the opponent's turn as well. These guys are kind of neat. I don't think it's good shooting. It looks like it's pretty comparable to Vigilors, and Vigilors don't have great shooting to begin with. But like, not unusable, I think. Especially since a lot of the shooting is just weaker in general. So, Investigators, if you can find some cavalry to shoot at. Anti-cav. Neat. Hit bonuses. Yeah, I actually think they're like, okay. Nothing special though. Sequitors. So these guys are another like Liberator type unit. They've got the same profile, same wheel, I should say. And then Sacrosanct weapons have crit 2 hits with 2 attacks, 3 threes, 1 damage. So worse than a Liberator. I think the Liberator gets crit mortals. And in this case, crit mortals are going to be better than crit 2 hits. 2 and 5 can replace their weapons with a Great Mace. And the Great Mace has an extra damage. And then any combat phase, the Sequitor can use Etheric Channeling. Effect, if this unit is contesting an objective you control, pick one of the following effects to apply for the rest of the turn. So you have to be contesting an objective you control. Other than the companion weapon ability, weapon abilities for attacks that target this unit have no effect. Okay. If this unit is contesting an objective you control, you pick an effect for these guys, and it goes out of its way to say, other than the companion weapon ability, the weapon abilities are for attacks. Okay, I understand. So if the enemy is attacking you, then it'll cancel out their like crit 2 hits, but they're just including this so that it doesn't cancel out the companion weapon ability on the enemy's attacks, because the companion weapon ability is a negative thing. All right, that makes sense. This unit's combat attacks score critical hits on an unmodified hit rolls of 5+. So essentially you either get +1 to hit, or you get the similar penalty on the opponent's side. So you can use the channeling if they've got a decent effect, a decent critical effect, or whatever other anti-infantry sort of thing on their weapon profile. It makes your unit a bit more survivable. I think before you used to get a ward or something. And if you want to do damage, then you can get sort of a +1 to hit. That's fine. They look like the same as Liberators and Vanquishers and all those sorts of units. They've got their own little niche where they're slightly better or slightly worse, but honestly, they're all the same to me. Sequitors. I do like the way these guys look, but just more Liberators, really. Like, they are different. There will be situations where they're slightly better, but I don't know. They all sort of do the same thing. Adjudicators with Skybolt bows. 5 move, 2 health, 3+ save, and 1 control. Skybolt bow is range 18 with 2 attacks, 3 threes, 1/1. And the Shockbolt bow, which I guess 1 in 5 guys gets, is D3 + 3 attacks. So like 5 attacks-ish, and it's got the same sort of profile. So you just get maybe another 3 attacks roughly from the Shockbolt bow. But instead of being crit auto wound, it is anti-monster +1 rend. So I suppose a lot of the time you might want to shoot your normal Skybolt bows at one unit and then shoot the Shockbolt bow at a monster specifically to take advantage of that +1 rend that it gets. Then they've got useless combat attacks and subduing shots once per turn army, any shooting phase. Pick a visible enemy monster unit that had any damage points allocated by this unit's shooting attacks. Roll a dice on a 3-up. That target cannot use rampage abilities until the start of your next turn. That's kind of neat because some rampages are really, really powerful. A bit weird that like Judicators are like monster hunters. I'm not sure if you want to take them over Vigilors, again, because they have worse combat profile. Only 1 attack here. They still don't have shooting combat, so like you are relying on that combat profile if they get tagged. I think Vigilors have range 18 as well. Yeah, there's not a lot of reason to take Judicators. Just that anti-rampage thing is kind of neat. If you've already got the models, I suppose. I'm not sure I'd bother taking them as Vigilors. They're pretty close, but they're sort of same thing as the Liberators. just more Vigilors, kind of. Not as close as Sequitors are to Liberators, but pretty close to the same sort of thing. Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows. We've got same sort of Stormcast wheel. The Boltstorm crossbow has 15-inch range with 3 attacks, 3 threes, 1 damage. This is a bit weird. If I remember right, the Vanguard Raptors with the big crossbows only had like range 12. I could go look that up, but just from memory, that's what it is. And these are longer range, and I was commenting in the Stormcast video that there's a huge difference between 12 and 18 inches, and the difference is like whether the enemy unit can charge you next turn a lot of the time. It does depend on their movement range and that sort of thing, but being 18 inches away is a long distance. They need to move. If they've got like move 10, then it's going to be like a 6-inch charge or something, right? Because you might have to get 2 ranks of your guys in range or something. You might be a little bit closer than the 18. So if you're 18 away, there's a good chance they can't charge you. But if you're 12 away, they're very, very likely to be able to make a charge against you. 15 is a better difference. Going from 18 to 15, certainly it's closer, but 15 is like, there are more situations where you can keep this unit safe. So I think 15 is about as close as you want to get for anything that doesn't actually have shooting combat and doesn't really want to be in combat at all. Anyway, they have 3 attacks, 3 threes, no rend, 1 damage. So actually kind of good. Anti-infantry +1 rend. So against infantry, they're probably outperforming the Skybolt bows a bit, but not by that much. I think this was always the problem with Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows and Judicators with Skybolt bows. The Skybolt bows were sort of good against everything, and the Boltstorm guys were generally much worse against most things, and then better against a very small niche. And I reckon that looks the same here. If you're, well, not a very small niche. The niche is bigger now. It's infantry in general. They're probably better against infantry, but I don't know. Judicators still look more reliable to me, and then Vigilors look more useful than both of them. So anyway, you've got a once per turn army, any shooting phase, hail of bolts. Pick a visible enemy infantry unit that does not have fly and that had any model slain this phase by this unit's shooting attacks to be the target. Roll the dice on a 3-up until the start of your next turn. Subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls. Oh, I think I spoke too soon. This is a very good ability. I suppose, actually, you have to use it with covering fire, but it can be a real thorn in people's sides if they want to use, if they want to charge your unit with an infantry unit and they don't have a way of putting something else closer to draw the covering fire. When you do covering fire, there's a good chance that you slay a model and then you roll this on a 3-up, they lose a die, and that's a big deal. Losing a die means you're very, very likely to fail your charge roll. These guys are actually kind of neat. There's a few hoops you have to jump through. You have to use covering fire. It's only against infantry. It's only on a 3-up. So probably because of all that, I don't know that they're going to be worth using. But that ability is quite powerful when it goes off. I would say probably more powerful than stopping a monster using its rampage abilities, but depends heavily on the rampage abilities. Some monsters have really, really, really good rampages. And I feel like this one, the anti-rampage thing, is easier to use on your own turn. You just damage a monster, stop it using a rampage ability, then charge it. That's kind of interesting. Whereas this thing, you really have to use it on covering fire particularly. So it's a very narrow set of circumstances. So Judicators with X-bows, anti-infantry, have a covering fire. It's not only for covering fire, but like reducing people doing covering counter charge is really awkward as well. You definitely don't want to spend the 2 points to do a counter charge on 1 dice roll, but I don't think that situation is going to come up enough for that to covering fire anti-charge ability. I don't think that situation is going to come up enough for that to matter. I think that's pretty situational. Yeah, I think if you take these, your opponent will find a way to deal with this or not worry about this. And there's enough counterplay with covering fire and things like that. And the fact they're only 15-inch range means you're not covering that huge area Yeah, just I don't think that'll be worth it. Vigilors in both cases are much more generally applicable, giving you +1 to hit. Just in both cases, they can help out your other units a lot more easily. They've got better combat attacks. I can't imagine it's worth taking these guys just because they're a little bit situational. They do have good effects in those situations, but hard to like force them into your list because they'll be not as useful in a lot of other situations. Okay, Retributors. I own a bunch of these guys. I really like the models for them. So sad that they're going, but I was almost a bit sad that they didn't just fully squat them immediately, and then I could just use them as annihilators with meteoric grand hammers, because they look like paladins with grand hammers. So anyway, I guess I'm stuck with Retributors either way. We got 4-inch move, 3 health, 3 up save, 1 control, so same as before. The lightning hammer has 2 attacks, 3 threes, 1 rend, 2 damage with crit mortal, so they look a bit like Chosen. The Star Soul Mace does crit mortals with only 1 attack, but has 2 rend and 3 damage. I actually think you don't want to take the Star Soul Mace. Up to 2 of them can replace their hammer with the Star Soul Mace. I haven't done the math on it, but I assume the lightning hammer is about as good and is probably a bit better. I think the same was true before. You actually didn't want to take the Star Soul Mace. The only exception is if you can get bonuses to attack, like you used to be able to use Unleash Thy Hatred. Bonuses to attack are better on the Star Soul Mace because it has a better profile, but otherwise the lightning hammer is going to do more damage on average, or at least the same sort of damage on average. Things like crit mortal doesn't stack up well with extra rend, and having the whole extra attack essentially means this profile has like 4 damage, and this profile has 3 damage. I just think the lightning hammer is probably going to be better. Anyway, you shouldn't buy these guys because they're getting squatted, so I guess it doesn't matter too much anyway. They're probably just arranged how you have them arranged. Passive, crushing counter blow. If this unit is damaged, or if any models in this unit were slain this turn, add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's attacks for the rest of the turn. Oh, I get it. They're like retribution, right? So you damage them, and then in retribution, they get +1 to hit. That's cute. It's not great. You don't want to let your opponent attack you first. But I suppose it's a nice consolation. I got used to this on my Ogroid Therodons, which can't really take a hit. They don't have a good armor save. They got like +1 to wound. It is nice to have. It's not nothing, and it does come up because your guys do take damage, and these guys are tough enough to take some damage and survive that damage. So I might say this is nothing, but it's not ideal either. So Retributors, okay, I guess. I think the gap, or not the gap, but like before, I think there was a good reason to take Annihilators with Grand Hammers or to take Retributors, and over time, it just looks more like you just take Annihilators, and Retributors are a bit obsolete now. So probably not better than Annihilators. Mainly because they do exactly the same thing, right? They're still just guys who hit pretty hard, and these guys don't have a fight first thing. The fight first thing is quite good on Annihilators with Meteoric Grand Hammers, and the Grand Hammers I think have a better profile than this. Not 100% certain, but yeah, I'd just take those Annihilators. Then we got Decimators. Oh, also, are these? Yeah, they are Warrior Chamber. Okay. Decimators, these are going to be the same as Retributors. They've got a Thunder Axe, which has more attacks but less damage, and crit 2 hits instead of crit mortal. They can also take Star Soul Maces, and they add 1 to the damage characteristic of their axes if the target has 10 or more models. So their Thunder Axes actually stack up to a fair bit of damage if you're in this situation, but 10 or more models is a lot less common than if it was 5 or more. It's not terrible. I don't know. Decimators. Actually, I'm going to put all of these in like Paladins. Or old Paladins, because the new ones are different. Better against 10+. I always prefer to take the I would just take Retributors because they're good against everything. Units that are good against... so these guys are good against targets that have 10 or more models, but so are Retributors. They just both do a lot of damage against targets that have 10 or more models because both of them do a lot of damage in general. It's just that Decimators do a lot less damage a significant amount less damage. Oh, actually, it's not a significant amount. They do a little bit less damage. The gap's closer. It used to be much worse. Decimators used to be like absolute garbage at dealing with single targets like monsters and stuff, or just low model units. The gap's closer. It really doesn't matter. Like if you have decimators, I wouldn't bother converting them or running them as a different unit. I just run them as decimators. But you know, I mean, this is pretty good when you get it, and this one's pretty bad, so it doesn't really matter. Protectors, these guys are a bit different to the above two. We've got similar profile, similar wheel, I mean, and then similar attacks to the decimators here, but we don't have any crit effect and you don't have a buff for the attacks. They can still take the Star Soul Mace though, so that'll in this case I think you do want to take the Star Soul Mace. I think that is better than the Stormstrike Glaive probably. You do drop that 1 damage, but because you don't have the crit effect, like up here you have crit mortal and crit 2 hits, which makes the native weapon a bit better, and you got the other buffs for it. So you probably don't want to take Star Soul Maces on these guys, but down here, I think the Star Soul Mace with Crit Mortal is going to be slightly better than those ones. You've got Passive Shield of the Storm. While any friendly Stormcast Eternals infantry heroes are within this unit's combat range, both this unit and the friendly unit, those friendly units have a ward 5 up. I think this is how Praetors work. I can't quite remember, but I will look it up for this one because they're very, very, very similar. So what do we... Come on. Well, this unit's soul bonded charge is within its combat range. Okay, so for Praetors, you do have to pick a soul bonded charge. Whereas these guys, just while an infantry hero is within range. I suppose that's another difference. These guys can pick any Stormcast Eternals hero to be their soul bonded charge, whereas these guys can only protect infantry heroes. I think that's a big distinction for a lot of the problems with bigger Stormcast heroes like Krondas is that they don't have a ward save. They've got a good armor save, but no ward save, so they die to mortal wounds really quickly. And a lot of the time when you're taking a unit like Praetors, you're taking it to make that unit a lot more durable and build like a sort of a castle around them. Protectors here are protecting a guy that's going to have guarded hero anyway and can't be shot, likely already has 6 wounds on a 3-up save, and that you could give like Mirror Shield or something like that. I just don't think you need this effect on Stormcast Eternals infantry heroes. A lot of the infantry heroes that you care about already have 5-up wounds, 5-up wards. So like Gardas and Bastion and Indrasta and all those sort of people, they already have 5-up wards. So like, I don't think this really does anything. So here's 5+ wards to infantry heroes. I assume these guys get the ward as well though. Both this unit and those units have a ward of 5-up, so they are a fair bit more durable. I'm trying to think if there's a good reason to exploit that durability. Maybe, I suppose, like you could just take Annihilators that get +1 to their save, or you could take, if I remember right, the difference between like taking Annihilators versus taking the new guys, Reclusians, is that Annihilators have a 2-up armor save, but Reclusians have like an ability ignore effect, and they can use the subfaction ability to give themselves a 5-up ward. So I think if you really wanted a unit to have a 5-up ward, you would probably just take Reclusians and take that subfaction, or you would take Gardas or something. I don't think Protectors are the way that you want to do this, and I don't think this War Scroll is that special that you want a 5-up ward on it. So like, it's not useless, but I wouldn't bother going out of my way to get Protectors. Themselves, I should probably mention that I'm talking about Protectors. Protectors. Okay. Oh, and that's it. That's all we got for the Stormcast supplement. Okay, hopefully that was useful. There are a few cool things in there. In particularly that Gavriel, I think is, he might be worthwhile just taking him in any Stormcast list. He's back to doing something that I think is really interesting. I might just double check that I'm getting that right. I did have a couple messages from people saying that they found a mistake. I'm doing like 6-hour content videos, so there's bound to be a few mistakes, but on the important ones, I should try and get those right. So it's going to be Warrior Chamber. That's fine. Your charge phase, not once per turn. Rest of the battle, when making charge rolls. Rest of the phase, when making charge rolls for the targets, add 1 to the number of dice rolled, then remove 1 of your choice and use the remaining dice. Yeah, I just think that's really neat. I don't know how much this guy costs, but he isn't here. 140, and you can take any infantry. That's kind of neat. So you can chuck your Annihilators in there with him. I actually think he's really good. I think there's like a strategy. He gives you a technology that you don't have in the rest of the army. I mean, I know you could use the Imperatant and he gives you a D3 move, and you could use Gardas, or you could use some combination of the both of them. But I think this is the most reliable charge out of Deep Strike ability that Stormcast get, next to like Indrasta or Praetors. But if you want to get your Annihilators into combat out of Deep Strike, this is looking like the best ability available to them. I think some people will miss it at first because it's in the supplement. People don't want to go out of their way, but you could use a Lord Celestin as this guy. There's a lot of different models that you could make into a Gavriel Shoreheart. He's a very generic looking dude holding a sword and a shield. So I'd have a look at that. And then, you know, I wouldn't want to go out of your way to get like a whole Sacrosanct army, but I do think there's some, the Cycle of the Storm stuff, maybe the Lord Arcanum Gryph-Charger with the Dracolines and Astria. I think I've been saying Asteria. I don't know how to say her name. I think there's something in that as well. You've got some charge out of Deep Strike, which is a really powerful tool. It can take opponents off guard. Those Dracolines have that strikes first when they fight on an objective. So being able to strike first, charging out of Deep Strike, I think that's something that a lot of opponents' armies won't be able to deal with very well, especially if you back it up with some ability like some shooting units to get rid of screens or something like that. I'm sure there's a list in there somewhere. There's definitely some unique stuff. Sad to see a lot of this stuff go. Like I said, I have a lot of Retributors myself. I was slowly building up a Stormcast Paladins army, just finding really, really cheap secondhand Stormcast. All that stuff is going to get squatted, and I guess I have to wait a year and then start using my Retributors as Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers. But mostly sad that some of the good stuff is going. Like, I hope we get some sort of replacement for the Knight Incantor. I also have one of these. I really like that model. I got the Lord Arcanum on Gryph-Charger. I think that model looks fantastic. And yeah, it's going to be sad to see them go. But for Stormcast players for now, they got some neat tools in this package. And yeah, when I'm doing the reviews going forwards, just at the end of this video, I'm going to be using a marking rubric. I won't go through it now, but hopefully I'm getting a bit better at reading the rules more carefully, making fewer mistakes, presenting more useful analysis. Having played some games now, I've got a better grasp on what's good and what's not. So hopefully over time that'll improve. And I'm going to be doing the review in a way that you can still focusing on design more than power level, but at the end of it, we'll be able to look through and sort of compare the design of different books. So sorry to the Stormcast Eternals players who missed out on that. I only made this afterwards. If you've liked this video, please do the YouTube gratuities, or whatever they're called. Obviously, liking it doesn't tell your friends like it does on Facebook, so it just really helps me out and costs you nothing. And if you want to donate, that's fantastic. I'd really appreciate that too. I'll leave the links for those sorts of things in the description. And yeah, hopefully this was useful for you. I'll be doing Slaves to Darkness next, which should be good because I play Slaves to Darkness and I know a fair bit about the book. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. All right, I'll leave it there.